All right, we are live for another episode of the Performance That Matters podcast. We're down in Sydney, new change, new arena, joined by two very special guests. I feel like I can barely tell them apart sitting here, but we're joined by Mick Baines, Chris Jaffrey. These are the masterminds behind one of the greatest, if not the greatest, UFC fighter to come out of Australia, Alexander the Great Volkanovski. Boys, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming south.
Now, for guys that don't know you, let's just go. Imagine you're in an elevator. We walk in. We've got 30 seconds. Bottom floor to fourth floor. You got to give them a 30-second elevator pitch. Who you are, what you do. Let's start with you, Bainesy. Give the people a bit of a rundown.
I'd say I'm Bainesy. I'm a physio who has spent the last 20 years in sport and who tends to blur the lines between physio and everything else that can help an athlete, help a person.
That was good. Now, Jeff, you got to top that because that was about 15 seconds. He only got 2 floors up on the elevator.
Chris Jaffrey, exercise physiologist, strength and conditioning coach. Lucky enough to work with Volk and some of the best up-and-coming MMA athletes in Australia. Started off strength and conditioning in rugby league. Thought that was my path, but lucky enough to have a whole lot of athletes that I look after trying to elevate their performance.
Yeah, we'll get into that because that's interesting because both of you guys have the history in rugby league and then made this transition. Start with you, Bainesy. How did that happen? How did you go from rugby league and then go, oh, you know what? MMA's over here. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, so and this will probably come up a few times. So I didn't make that transition. I was asked to – I sort of started at the top down. So my first MMA athlete that I treated was Volk. And I hadn't never watched a fight. I had no combat sports background. I was asked via, I think, one of his previous managers to have a look at this guy, mostly because of my work through sort of State of Origin, Rugby League and sort of NRL stuff. I was local, and so I met Alex. I'd sort of put aside half a day to get to know him when he was really struggling with some injury problems. And then from there, I sort of, I think like the second MMA athlete I would have treated was probably Izzy. And then, I remember treating Leon, and then all of a sudden we're treating MMA athletes a little bit lower down. So I sort of went in reverse to how most people probably do it.
I was going to say, Baines, it's crazy because considering Volk's your first fighter, you work with basically all the top champions Australia-wide, probably anyone you've worked with them in the MMA space. Absolutely wild. How many years ago was that Alex first walked in? Is this Alex on the rise? Is it, how far into his career was he?
Well, again, so I didn't know any of this. He was in the UFC, obviously. It was
2018. So I think he was ranked 12 or 13.
This is like the Chad Mendes round there.
Pre-Chad Mendes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go. So that's, I'd seen him on Win News that they were doing a campaign to get him in the UFC, but I didn't really, I was there because one of actually Talisha Quinn, so an NRLW player, she played for Australia. She'd bumped into his manager. He'd asked who she saw for a physio. She'd given him my number, and then, sorted from there.
And you might be listening to this and thinking that's absolutely wild, but it's not. Because in the fighting world, you got to remember the UFC is only, 30 years old now. The UFC Performance Institute, which is the gold standard for everything that we do, has only been around for, 5-6 years. Combat sports physio probably wasn't a thing back then. I know for nutrition, it wasn't really until 2015 that we actually started getting good data and being able to look at this and go, okay, how do we actually scientifically go about this process? Before that, it was just complete bro science. So if you're listening to this and going, how the heck is Alex Volkanovski, 2018, coming up against Chad Mendes? He's on one of the biggest runs ever. How does he not have a combat sports specific physio? Because that just didn't exist. It's like, I couldn't think of anyone that did that beforehand.
No, and I think the thing that most people don't realise, even now when I speak to people, is until you're at the very top, there's no money. So you are really relying on sponsors or goodwill, and and you contrast that with some of our backgrounds. When you're 16 and you sign a 4-year deal as an NRL player and you get added to a top squad on a minimum wage of 130 grand, everything's paid for you. You get paid, and you've got a full medical team. You can be top 10 in the world when some of the athletes I treated this morning even, they're UFC athletes. They get paid only when they fight. They might fight twice a year. They might have a loss, so it's half a fight. It is absolutely crazy how little money is in it until the very top. So you really need to work with people that are there for the right reasons.
Yeah. So, Jeff, how did Volk come into your life?
So I was doing some programming upstairs at work, and Bainesy walks up and he's like, "Jaff, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, just doing some programs." And he goes, "You ever heard of Alex Volkanovski?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And he goes, "I hadn't." And he goes, "Come down here and meet him. You're going to be his new S&C." So walked downstairs. Bainesy gave the history, what he was dealing with injury-wise, what we were trying to avoid in that session. It's like, "Righto, boys, get going." And we started a strength and conditioning session that moment. So that was the very first time I'd met him, and half an hour later we were working, and then a couple of months later, Chad Mendes, I think it was 4 months later, he fought Mendes, and the rest has been history, really.
So what's going through your mind then when Alex, or I guess Bainesy comes upstairs and says Alex is downstairs? Because I'm assuming before then, no combat sport athletes coming through, or very minimal, or?
Yeah, so I'd only ever programmed one MMA athlete before, who was a mate, who actually lost. So 0 and 1 to having a top 15 MMA athlete, or UFC athlete, I should say. Yeah. So, I was lucky enough. I followed the sport. Like, I'd been to UFC, I think it was 110 in Sydney back in the day. So I was in and out of watching it over the years. So I knew, like, the requirements of what he had to do. But at that stage, it was more about just getting him moving better. So the backstory is, in the 2 years prior to seeing Bainesy and me, he would organise a fight. Like, the fight would be locked in. He would do the 6-week, 7-week training camp, and then have a week off, go to get back into training, and then he would hurt his back. He would have a flare up, and then he'd be scared to train. So he really hadn't had that much training for a good 2-year block. So that's where we thought we could make the change straight away and help get him moving better and get him actually back in the gym in the off-camp situation, so he can build his skills and be the athlete that he wanted to be.
So what's the process then? Do you guys get together when he comes in and he goes, "Hey, look, boys, this is bad. This hurts when I bend over. This hurts when I'm lifting weights. I'm injured here." How do you guys get together and then go, "Okay, look, we've got this guy. He's good. We know he's athletically amazing. He could probably be a lot better." How do you guys even go about, okay, this is the plan? What's the process with that?
Week to week, or the first time?
Both. First time originally, but then we'll get to that.
So if I was doing Jaff's elevator pitch, I would say, like, this is Jaff. In my eyes, he's the best S&C I've worked with globally. He has an ability to put the athlete at the centre and create what they need, not what he wants to do, so to speak. And so we've had a relationship for, I don't know, probably 10 years or so before then. And just so implicit trust. So basically, wherever I needed someone to make a strength integration and not make it sort of conflict to the physio messaging, Jaff had always been the person. So really, the second half of my consult is always, now where can I transition to Jaff? Because by getting out of the physio space, being out of the unwell, medical model and into a gym with total trust that the messaging will be consistent, means that it's like mincing up veggies in your kid's dinner. Like, they don't know it's there, right? So they think they're just training in the gym, and really Jaff's totally putting out the pain science, the movement optimism, all the real key physio words is happening without them knowing about it. So, I think that probably is where we work well together.
And what are you doing, Jaff, when he comes in? Are you taking, like, okay, this is what I think an ideal MMA athlete should be in terms of their strength measures, testing, whatever, doing that testing with Alex and going, okay, this is where we need to improve or work on, or whatever? How did you go about that? Because if he's never had any of this background and he was playing footy before, so we all know how footy guys work out, just bro lift and whatever. So if he's coming in doing that, how are you even starting this process?
So
I think confidence. I mean, like, for me, I needed him to be confident in the gym and his body. And so that was sort of the first mission brief to Jaff was, this dude's got no trust in his body. He's got some serious stuff going on, but in our language, this is what I want to achieve. And then, oh, by the way, he's petrified of this lift. He's petrified of this. 2 surgeons have told him not to do this. 2 physios have told him never to do this again. You need to break through that and show that he can trust his body. I think was.
Yeah, so at the time, we just needed to get him back training on the mats to develop his technical side. So there wasn't performance training. We knew where we were coming from wasn't great. So I think Bainesy hit the nail on the head. It was all about confidence at the start, just getting confident in his body, confident that he could turn up to training every day, and not live with this fear of his back going to be injured. So he actually went from that 2-year period where he was only doing camps to that 13 weeks in leading into the Chad Mendes. He didn't miss a session. So there was a few touch and go sessions there, and we had to make some training modifications. But the more you're on the training mats, the better, the more technical proficiency you're going to get, and that builds the conditioning, the reps, the technique, and your sport specific side of things. That is what they do.
I think one thing too, we were really fortunate early is because I don't speak any of the language. I didn't have a clue what went into it. I didn't know the difference between a wrestling session or a jit session or a wall session. I mean, you've seen me in camp. I just sit on the exercise bike. Is that Jaff could translate, and Lopez was really open after we'd sort of made him realise how little he knew of the other way coming back. And so the good thing for Joe is that Jaff could do a translation summary of, we're not trying to take your athlete away from you, but in stand-up, this is what I want him to focus on, or these are the cues for his thing. And so it really came together nicely. I would have an oversight, Jaff would program, Jaff would translate, Jaff would do most of the work, and then Volk would feel good in the gym, feel good in his training, and go from there.
Was there some hesitation from Volk when he came in? And I'll preface it with saying, whenever I've done diets, especially early on, way back in the day, before we had a social media presence, before it was more accepted to, I'm going to have a dietitian, this is like okay to do, it was really, really tough. You would almost spend the first camp getting that buy-in, being like, hey, this actually does work, and you've got to just trust me. And I'd always have this friction with the athlete, the coach, the teammates, anyone else that was around, until you did it, and then they came out and said, oh, you know what, that was amazing, I feel good. Did you guys have that when Alex came in? And I think straight away, Jaff, when I started combat sports years and years ago, there was that whole notion, if you lift weights, you're going to be slow. If I lift weights, it's going to make me injured, or it's going to ruin my training. Was there any of that you had to conquer and get over at the beginning?
Yeah, of course. I think it was the first session he told me, I'll never do a deadlift ever again, so don't make me do that. But he also told me in that first week that he was going to be the world champion. So he's like, if you can get my body right, I believe I've got the tools to be world champion. And I'm like, geez, this guy's got the confidence. And he truly believed it. So he wanted to believe what we're saying, because he saw that, there was a way out and a way to get a way out of the current cycle that he was going through. So he saw there was a way to achieve that. And I think the biggest thing from my point of view was telling him that and showing him that, strength and conditioning is there to help you improve at MMA. I don't care what you lift. I don't care how. We're not powerlifting here. Our results aren't based on your squat or your deadlift. It's based on what you can do in the MMA cage. And he fully bought into that. He's like, because he'd been to some different strength and conditioning coaches before. I think he was working out with some CrossFit mates and things like that, who they see this level of athlete, and you tell Volk you can't jump that high, and he's going to jump that high. You can't lift that weight. I can lift that weight, and he'll do it. So just because he could do something doesn't mean we needed to make him do that. It's not a circus performer. It's we do it to be better at MMA.
Well, I mean, if we go back 12 months when the journo from the Telegraph was trying to do a piece on Alex, and he was just pushing for what he lifts. Yeah, but what's his deadlift? And you could hear Joe, that's not the number isn't the number. It's about how he moves and how confident he is, and everyone wants to see that big, total. What's his, at 66 kilos, can he deadlift 220? And I don't know. It's not really the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here.
Let's talk about that initial phase, he came in, got the buy-in. I'm sure it was a bit rough, like it was for all of us when we start working with any fighter. You get the buy-in, they're bought in, Alex is bought in, Joe's bought in, the guys at the gym are bought in, go, hey, you know, these two bald guys know what they're talking about. Jaffy probably had hair back then. But
Sort of. It was on the way out anyway.
let's talk about what does that look like nowadays, though? Because obviously Alex is the ultimate professional in the sense that, and he's one of the few fighters that do this. I know it sounds weird if you're listening, but actually is the 365 athlete. Will train, will still go to the gym, will still do his prehab, will get everything in. Kind of follows his diet. He's not as good on that on the off season, but he does it year round. So what are you doing? We'll start with you, Jeff, and then we'll jump over to you, Bainesy. How are you putting that all together then? If you go, okay, we're probably only fighting 1 or 2 times a year. What are you doing with the rest of the year if he's in and out of the gym? How are you structuring it? What are the goals? What are you doing?
Yeah, so with most fighters, we generally break it into that 2 phases of, you know, for simplicity, into the off-camp and then in-camp period. So off-camp, we're trying to build the overall machine, build the capacity of what he can handle. So, you know, that becomes challenging when the off-camp period, you're not sure how long it goes. So, you know, here, as you said, Volk's really good at, you know, maintaining his attendance and getting the work done. So, you know, we do things in terms of testing to see different strength and power metrics, to see if there's any little tweaks we can make programming-wise to build up his areas of weakness. Also, you know, highlighting his areas of strength too. So then we spend plenty of time getting on top of his niggles and, you know, utilising those underused muscles and movements. Obviously, when he's been doing it for so long, there's a build-up of different patterns and muscles that are overwork. So, you know, just trying to get him basically to feel better. So, but basically, the overall premise is to build a better athlete in the off-camp period. So, deliver a higher level of physical capacity ready for that in-camp period.
Yeah. And what are you doing, Bainesy? Obviously, you're working very closely with Jaff through that. And I imagine a lot of what you're doing is, hey, I've got these niggles. How do I sort them out so I can go train and do everything, right?
Yeah, and I think the point with Alex as an example, but I mean, we'll get to Colby down the track, but any of these guys who are full-time, you know, even off-camp, they're full-time 7 or 8, I don't know, 9, however many sessions a week they do. So there's no real off. I feel like the training intensity doesn't really change that much. Obviously, they for your work, they're fully loaded. They're not doing it under fatigue. But, you know, these guys have been on the grind for 10, 12, I mean, 16, 18 years, right? And any session has the opportunity to tear a toe capsule, to stir up a nerve root, to get caught and have it really is, where are we today? Where were we versus, Volk's been really structured and the sort of structure around him for the last 6 or 7 years, how long it is now, is that we do see him, we touch point twice a week. And pretty much 49, 50 weeks of the year. So there's nothing that really lingers. It's well documented, some of his challenges with some of his joints. So there's always something to maintain, manage. We don't at any stage think we're solving it. The biggest thing that I get asked around Alex's is his understanding of like cutting edge pain science, threat behavior, the need to train versus not train, what is okay to train through, what's not. He calls himself a mind specialist now. He's a professor in that. He can tell you which is an injury that we can train with and what we can't. He gets it right some of the time.
How did you develop that with him? Because obviously he doesn't come first day 2018 and have that built in. That's something you develop over years and years of education, building the trust, giving him really good knowledge, giving him the good feedback as well. Yeah. How does that happen?
So like for me, I took a bit of a risk early on, and I think you and I have spoken about this a lot off air, but I was in a fortunate position. I put aside 3 hours, I think, the first time I met Al. So I wasn't rushed between patients. I wasn't trying to do 2 things at once. I was just listening to this whole story. And what we talk about as thought viruses. Like he had all of these stuff front of brain that was like a non-negotiable. That was the facts. And most of it was just fundamentally wrong. And so we spent a couple of hours probing to find where I could, and I'd have 4 or 5 goes at a different metaphor that would land flat. And basically, and similar podcast to this on the Rogan podcast, he spoke about the story where I ended up throwing a pencil at him and getting to pick it up because he was petrified to bend and pick a pencil up. But he was happy to spar that morning. But he thought he needed more core strength. And, I've said to him that there's no one on the planet right now that would have better core strength than you. You just don't know how to turn it off. And that was sort of like the first crack through of, oh, that makes sense. All right. So I can't pick my kid's shoes up, but I can spar 25 minutes with no pain. Okay, well, that's not structural then, is it? Like a broken leg is a broken leg. And don't get me wrong, the evolution of these conversations now they're challenging because there's always an argument back around pathology. But it was we really invested front end a lot of energy to bring Alex along to understand it. And it was around that time, if you've got a fracture, we can't challenge the fracture, but you don't have a fracture. So let's get the movement. And yeah, the trust element off the back of that first camp where he didn't miss a session for 13 weeks, which had never happened before, that then was, to your point, okay, let's buy into what else can come.
How common is that you get these fighters come in and, like you said, if you've got a fracture, you've got a fracture. You can see it on the x-ray. It's like you can't do anything. But niggles, everyone has niggles. Like you said, anyone's doing 8 to 10 sessions a week, your body's going to break down to some capacity. And it's just purely by the nature, you're not going to give it enough time to recover. We've all got niggles. How do you manage that? And is that common that they come here and they go, oh, you know what, I have all this pain. And I've heard you talk about this before, Bainesy, where, yeah, you have the pain, but so what? How common is that? And how do you go about getting rid of those thought viruses when these fighters are coming in and going, Bainesy, my hamstring's gone, blah, blah, blah. And you're looking at these reports going, it's not. We've just got to get this guy back in. How do you go about managing that?
Look, it's my favourite part of the job, truthfully. Is you start with they're coming from a position where that's all they know, okay? And, we do, I think, 2 things happen in our industry. Physios or health professionals treat patients as if they're dumb. So they try to dumb it down for them rather than actually go big and explain the whole system. We make the effort that we want to talk about capacity, we want to talk about threat, we want to talk about actual, like we'll talk about red flags, for example. Like if you don't have cancer, if you're not, incontinent, if you don't have foot drop, then your back pain is probably not structural in nature. And if it's not structural in nature, that doesn't mean you're not sore. And I'll say this now because I know that Alex, for example, would be like, I'm not saying it's in your head. I'm absolutely not, but I'm saying that it's threat-based and we need to show you what you can do. And then that's why this relationship works so well because I'm like, and even last week when we're over in New Zealand, I'll ring Jaff and say, I need an example in a kickboxing setting that can show that a rec fem tear can't do hip extended kicking, but it can do something. And Jaff's like, sweet, tell them to do some, stand southpaw and do this or whatever. We're constantly showing them what they can do, but then getting across to the coaching staff and saying, we're not giving them a free golden ticket here to do everything. These are the restrictions. And if they stick to the restrictions, there's a lot out there in the arena that they can do, which then builds the trust in their body and in their people.
What percentage of injuries fall into that category? Because you guys see lots and lots of fighters, right? Like I said, everyone's got niggles. So what percentage of injuries for these fighters that they think, hey, this is pretty catastrophic, and then in reality it's not? You just need to change around and go, hey, let's rejig this and put this in. Can you put a number to it? Is it, because I'm assuming it's a lot higher than what they would assume?
I always come back to back pain. So, the numbers would suggest that 8 to 14% of back pain is structural in nature. All right, so essentially 1 in 10, 1 in 12, right? But everyone's back pain is real, and so it's showing them how they're contributing to it, and that sort of thing. I always, if there's a mechanism, if there's a mechanism of injury or there's a pathology, then we need to respect that, absolutely. But the benefit of having someone that understands the sport and understands every part of S&C like Jaff is I'll just say this is what I don't want them doing, and this is the movement patterns that I'd like them to embrace, and then it's all rebuild, reload through that way.
Because that's super common, right? Like you don't even have to be working with UFC fighters. You see it on Embedded all the time where someone will go, and there was the famous video that came out of Israel a couple camps ago. I think it was, I'm not sure if it was at Pereira or wherever, where he twists the funny way and then his knee just went, right? And his knee, he heard it, and straight away you could almost see Israel going through the paces being like, okay, that happened, but it's okay. We'll find a way to get through it with his workarounds. And I'm sure he got in contact with you, Baines, and worked around it, right? But the immediate reaction when a fighter gets injured, oh my God, this is catastrophic. I'm out. I'm not doing this. But we're saying, you know what, probably only 10% of the time it is catastrophic.
That was back pain. But I'll hand to Jaff because I'm hogging the mic here. But you and I obviously have spoken about this a lot, is that I think two things happen. Commercially in Australia, healthcare is expensive. And so these guys, up until the top 3, 4 in the world, have no money. So who have you got access to? And if you've sponsored, if the only person that is making money out of you being injured is the doctor, the physio, the specialist, how incentivized are they to give you? It's a really sketchy area because you want someone that's going to spend all this time helping you and then promote your independence and your resilience. That sort of doesn't happen that much. It is a really tough spot. These fighters have no health literacy. They're petrified that it's bad. So then they don't go and get it looked at. And then this person's not paid to go and talk to their S&C. This person's not paid to try and talk to their coach. You can see where things fall between the cracks.
Yeah. And what about on your end, Jaff? How does that work when they are coming in injured and you've spoken to Baines and you go, hey, look, and I'm just saying 10% because it'll make it easy for the listener. Let's just say 10% of those injuries are truly catastrophic and the other 90%, hey, there's a workaround. We can still keep you out here. What are you doing then when you come in? Are you doing movement assessments? Is it testing? What is it?
Yeah, it could be either or. One of the sort of quotes, I went to see a Olympic sprint coach talk one time. He's 10-time Olympic, or he's been to 10 Olympics with different athletes. Jesus. And he said, obviously you want to follow plan A, but if someone's injured, you move to plan B. And if that doesn't work, and so on, C, D. So we've got to be versatile. We've got to find what they can do, what the limitations is. Bainesy spells it out for me. Don't do X, Y, and Z. And then it's my job to find those other things that the person can do. Because these guys and girls, these fighters, they want to train. Like they know it's their livelihood. So they'll do anything they can too. So we just need to rejig it, give them a bit of confidence, and often that goes a long way. Often they can see the light at the end of the tunnel and go, okay, this might be a workaround for a few weeks, but I'm still training, and then slowly we can drip feed back in the different, whether it be some grappling, whether it be wrestling, whether it be pads, that type of thing. We try and keep them doing it as close to their sport as possible. And that often it helps with buy-in because they know that we're not going to say no. If we say, look, you probably should rest this up, get it scanned, they know, we're serious about it as well. Like we won't just tell them to have sessions off for the sake of it.
And what's the communication like back to the team, say the head coach or whoever the coach is? Because that's important info, like you just said. If you guys say no, then the coach needs to be on board and understand why he's sitting on the sidelines. How do you guys manage that?
Yeah, so with all the freestyle guys, obviously it's a text or a phone call to Joe. He's really open about it and open to it. He would rather the person be fine so it doesn't inhibit their the training or a future fight. He's quite happy to modify training because he knows these athletes, these fighters are in so much. They're in so regularly. He's never worried about their condition. It's always let's get them to the fight healthy. And we're happy with their skill level.
Do you find this is a real unique component of MMA in the fact that when you say with the Dragons or New South Wales Origin, you've got everything in-house. So all of these rugby league players are coming through, they're getting screened, every health professional seeing them, the team doctors seeing them, everyone's in a room, there's notes getting passed around. But when we go to MMA, that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist, which creates a really interesting challenge, like you said, Bainesy, for these guys that say don't have a set team around them, and they might not have a South Coast health hub where they can go get a all-in-one shop. Is that a real challenge, do you find, or is it because of the setup you guys have, it makes it so much more seamless, or how's that work?
I mean, it's easy for us because it's what we do. And we've been really fortunate that we don't just do this. So the rest of our business takes care of a lot of other things, and particularly the freestyle team, we're really committed to making sure that whatever they need, they get. So they sort of have a team now. We'll use our doctors, our specialists, our imaging partners. They are really feeling the love, and that's probably the legacy that Alex's career has created for a lot of these Hex and Eternal fighters, and even local to use that. I think the bigger challenge is we see a combat sports athlete who doesn't even do all of their training at the one place. So they do their jits here, or they do their striking over there, and for a fact those two coaches aren't talking. So then it all falls back on the athlete, and we'll like idiot-proof it and say, that's the sheet that we want you to take to your different coaches. That's a challenge.
I was going to say, how does that work? Because that's super common, especially around Sydney. Like freestyle, I would say, there's a couple, but is probably the main hub where they've got all of this. Everyone's a floater outside of that. The city kickboxing people go to. But
we're finding that with Melbourne, where we're rehabbing some pretty high-profile athletes down in Melbourne, and because the coaches don't need to listen to us. So we'll give our opinion to the athlete, but also we're just talking about their strength component and their injury component. We don't have any say over their load, their session. There's a challenging one at the moment.
Yeah, and it's a huge challenge because, everyone wants to show their worth. So that from the S&C to the coach to the wrestling coach, jiu-jitsu coach, boxing coach. So, it's not let's tone it down. It's let's show that my position's worthwhile. So intensity and volume just skyrocket often at the athlete's detriment. So it almost needs that someone sitting on top, the head coach, the captain of the ship, but doesn't actually happen. So that can obviously pose its challenges.
What would you say if there's a young athlete listening to this and they go, man, you know what? I want to be the next Volk. It's probably encouraging for them to hear, hey, Volk didn't always have this setup. But now there's more knowledge of it. They might not be in a position where they can afford it. They might be sitting here going, man, I can't afford a physio, I can't do it. But what do you suggest for them? Because they might be that person that's floating around and they might be getting injured. They might need strength conditioning. How do they manage it? How do they go about it then? What do you guys think?
The big thing, I think they need to slow cook themselves. Everyone wants it to happen now. They want to get super strong or the best. I need to do 25 sessions per week because I need to get good right now. They don't see the 15 years that Volks trained to get to this level. Colby starting, when he's 8 or 9 years old, probably younger, wrestling. So that's, 15 years of work to be that overnight success. You've got to slow cook it. You can't, one session's not going to get you any closer, but a lot of one sessions will. So the biggest advice would be, don't be in a rush. You need to develop your skills, technically, obviously, but also your strength and conditioning. It takes time to get supremely well conditioned, and it's not as hard to get someone strong, but if you're trying to do it in a short window, that's when it impacts the other things.
Yeah, Jeff's too humble. So for me, I would start with, to paraphrase, long-term athlete development it was a buzzword. I don't think we're allowed to say it. We don't use it anymore. There's another analogy for it. But essentially, if it was an athlete looking for what to do, for me personally, I'd just ring Jaff and I'd say, right, I'm in Queensland, Melbourne, wherever. We've got a Californian soccer player at the moment. This is what I want to get to. All right, you can then have your local providers, your local masseuse, your local physio, whatever, but you need someone that can manage not this block, but this block is part of this, column, and then this column is part of this foundation, and that's the most important investment. And, you know, for those people, you're only really touching base with a long-term strength programmer every 4, 5, 3, 6 weeks, something like that. That's your investment, right? And then you can shop around as to which wrestle coach you want to be with, or which jits gym, or you know, it's no different for soccer, it's no different for basketball, no different for tennis. You need to be an athlete that's resilient, because the athlete that doesn't get injured is able to go to more sessions and get technically better. The athlete that is progressing within appropriate timelines isn't spiking load, hurting tendons, doing dumb stuff. It really is the foundation. And we've been lucky now. You know, we've got some young fellas making their Jersey Flegg under 21s debut who started working with Jaff when they were 13, 14. You know, it comes, just not now.
So we're saying that if you are one of these athletes, even if you're an amateur, it probably pays big dividends in the long run to have one person managing most of it. Even at the start, that person is you and you have to manage it. Or if you can find a trusted physio or S&C coach just to say, hey, I need someone to be helping me with this long-term development. I need you to be in touch. Would you say that's absolutely worth it, even early on?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, agree. Heard it here first. Let's talk about Colby, because Colby is one of the most talented guys I've ever met, and I often forget that he's, 25? Is he 25? 24. He's probably one of the wisest 24-year-old kids that I've ever met, and I've never seen a guy read so many books. But what's the difference between dealing with someone like Colby, who's making his UFC debut, and then, say, someone like Volk, who's gone through it? He's gone through the gauntlet. He's been at the top. He's still at the top. How's your guys' approach to someone like Colby different to someone like Volk?
I think it's physically, it's quite a good contrast. Like Volk's that little tank, very rigid, you know, quite immobile. Where Colby, I don't know if he can still do it, but I told him not to, but he could sit on the ground and put his leg behind.
Yeah, I've seen him.
Like, maybe cut that one. Cut that one out, Colby. But so, yeah, the approach is quite a lot different, physical-wise. Volk's what we call like a fast responder. I could put a program in 3 weeks. Like we could say, this is the adaptation. We need to get you strong. In 3 weeks, he's, you know, up to the numbers quite fast. Where Colby's a little bit more aerobically driven. I think it goes back to his ultra marathon style running days, but yeah, so he takes a bit longer. So we might have it, we're like, okay, strength is what we're after, but we might need to run the same block with some slight tweaks for like 2 months as an example. And by that time, he's throwing those really good numbers. So the big difference is Volk's warm-up's about 3 times longer to get him moving, where Colby's already got the required mobility. So we look at more of a stability-based approach. But again, Colby's still obviously early on in his career. So, you know, we need to follow that long-term athletic development approach with him too. So, you know, slow cook them, build upon the foundations each off camp, and don't try to force adaptation like that. That'll come.
And what about you, Bainesy?
Yeah, I mean, Colby's such unique in his own way. So we met Colby when Alex broke his back. I mean, we've got to say, we've got to say the truth. We've got to tell the truth.
We got a whole list of things that have been blacked out from coach we're not meant to talk about.
We can talk about that one.
He spiked him on his head and broke his back.
He scorpioned him. I don't know, suplex, wasn't it? So, I mean, there has been multiple times over the last 7 years where I've got a phone call. When you get 3 or 4 calls from Al, it's normally bad, right? And I mean, only 2 years ago, before the Yair fight, I had 3 calls while I was coaching a soccer team. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be bad. He said, oh, it's not me. It's all right. It's just Colby. I put a knee through his ribs and he's in a bit of strife. But no, truthfully, when we first met Colby, we were lucky. We met him at 17 and he was coming back from a significant, significant injury, and he was chill. He was like, it's not about today, you know, tell me what to do. And fortunately for Colby and the way that it's all gone down is it gave us an opportunity to bring him under the umbrella straight away. So, you know, this is a 12 to 24 week rehab. You're going to be in and around the facility. You're going to be doing your strength with Jaff. Don't call it physio, call it rehab, call it strength. And he sort of bought into everything, and that's where, from day one, we spent as much time telling Colby just to, you don't need to run a marathon on Christmas Day with no gels just to prove you can. You do need to eat, like things like that. But he's been, I always talk about it when my staff will all wear a Slickness shirt, and I'm talking reception staff, male, female, everyone, just out of homage to how much respect Colby pays to the staff in the building, and he's huge on supporting his sponsors and things like that. He's a pretty rare kid, so everyone's thrilled to see him. And obviously by the time this goes out, we won't know if he wins or loses on the weekend. But it, he took the long road. He's done everything that's been asked of him. He's had some challenges.
Yeah, when people ask me who's the biggest prospect in Australia, I always say Colby, and they go, "Oh, why?" And I go, "Just for the simple fact of what that guy has gone through in 10 years. I've never met a kid more resilient." And then you go down to the gym, and then I don't think people realize when Alex says, "Oh, he's been my main training partner." No, he's legitimately been Alex's main training partner. And since Colby was, 17? Yeah. And it's like he's gone through the gauntlet with Volk. And Volk, if you've seen him train, he's very measured. He's very, very smart. But Volk, I remember Volk double-legging me one time and my soul left my body. He's a strong little man. It's like Colby's just done that. That's just been his life for 10 years. He's, very, very excited. I want to talk about Jaff, if we throw it back to you, though. If we talk about fight camp, so Colby's just come to the end of a fight camp, right? And then Volk starting a fight camp. What does that look like from your end? Are you taking these guys and then going, okay, Colby, these are all your numbers from last time. Let's get you in the gym, do some testing. This is what we need to work on. This is what we're programming. Can you talk to us how you go about at the start of fight camp, what you're working on, and then talk about how you structure it? How does it structured and what are you trying to improve? What's the testing? And talk us through all that.
Yep, for sure. So I think it was just before Christmas time we did a big testing day, got all the MMA crew in. So, they're each at different points. So we try and get them all in together. Obviously, if we're deep into camp, 2 weeks out, we're not going to test Colby. But we want to know their baseline, In the off camp, we'll try hit some type of testing. Usually it's one we use quite regularly is the jump testing. So on our 4 stacks, we'll counter movement jump and a paused or a squat jump it's called. We hit that quite regularly because that's something that they're used to jumping regularly in their training sessions. But then we'll have more of a bigger testing day where we get their strength measures in the term of an isometric mid-thigh pull it is, and a few other things. Get their baseline so we can see how our previous blocks of training has worked, see if there's anything we need to tweak individually, if they're sort of not up to their standards or there's normative data out there as well as if they're not quite where that is, whether maybe we need to tweak something individually for them. So we try and regularly hit some type of testing so we know their numbers, whether it is in camp or off camp. But in camp, the best way to describe it, we have a progressive decrease in training volume in the gym, that is, while we're increasing their power-based exercise and explosiveness. It's never sat well with me when I hear fighters saying, I've never been stronger right in fight camp. I'm like, is that really what you're working on 3 weeks out from and I've seen it. I've seen these people post they're breaking a PB 3 weeks out from a fight. And I think they've got to drop a kilo a week, or roughly. Some of these guys and girls, they're calorie depleted. They're going to the fight gym and getting absolutely killed, putting themselves through hell to be conditioned. Yet the strength and conditioning coach is going to test or break PBs three weeks out. Have we got our eyes on the prize here? So I like to reduce kind of sequentially down the training volume, slightly in intensity too. So we don't like the athletes, obviously, we don't let them get weak, but that's not the main focus.
Are there blocks that you're focusing on, Jaff? Like, is there and I don't even know the language, alactic block? Is there a strength block? Is there a power block? And say this is week 1 to 2, this is week 3 to 4 that you kind of generally follow for like most fighters, or like you said, obviously individual, but is there a flow that you would generally follow?
Look, there is a flow, and it's, there is a lot of different periodization schemes, but in general, like MMA is concurrent. We need all types of physical qualities, every day. We need some type of maximal strength and isometric strength, max force for the grappling exchanges. We need to be fast and explosive for, our footwork and our kicking and punching. They're high speed, high velocity tasks. So it's something you can never fully go down one route. You've always got to have like elements of each, but there's most definitely you prioritize different qualities at different times. So strength and maximum strength kind of underpins a lot of things, like in terms of your power and explosiveness. So that's often the high priority off camp and early camp, sort of maintaining what you've built. But then you're progressively going into more power-based drills, more velocity-based drills as it gets closer to the fight.
And what are you looking for when you're measuring that? Because you're doing it pretty frequently, doing these baseline testing with your counter movement jump and mid-thigh pull and everything else. What are you looking for, and how are you adjusting based on those numbers?
Yeah, so the few measures we use, obviously jump height being one, but that's a little bit susceptible to the weight fluctuations. Like, you can make yourself look real good if you're using just purely jump height based off your body weight, because as you get lighter, you can obviously jump a bit higher. So we'll use some different loads with a trap bar to see their power output across a few different loads equated to their body weight as well. Look at how they're using their eccentric utilization, it's called. So, basically the ratio between a jump where you start up, dip down and jump, versus a squat jump or a pause jump at the bottom. So we can see how they're using like the elasticity of the system, which that down up causes. So then we look at those type of things to see where they sit. And see if there's a little adjustment. So, I've got a little bit of a system that I use, but those just might tweak the plyometric drill if they're not quite up to speed with their elasticity. So we might have more focus on that for their plyometric drills, things like that.
What are you working on, Bainesy, when fight camp starts? Is it a similar type of thing? Do you have a progression that you go, hey, look, I guess you're going to get this much load in you and this is going to be injured, so if I'm seeing you twice a week, we're going to work on this? Or is it just completely reactive? How does it work?
I mean, it's funny, so how I'm sitting here listening a little bit stunned to that is how I am most weeks with it. So I just trust that Jaff's got the process under control. It's funny, like we talk about the humility there, like it's always about the athlete. So there's so much goes in behind the scenes, but then it's got to be coached to them, how they receive it. And to touch on one of those points is, if someone has, so a mid-thigh pull is only as good as their grip strength, really. So if someone's coming off an ulnar nerve contusion where they took a kick and they can't grip properly, we're not going to go and do it and make them look stupid. It's constantly evolving as to what that person needs at that time, which is, where, we joked about renaming our last chat, the Jaff Admiration podcast. Like it's the ability to make it about the athlete and not about there. And we see it all the time, don't we? Like someone's just done a fitness test 2 weeks out from their, some sort of, UFC or rugby league or whatever. And you're like, why would you do that other than to make the coaches look good or the S&C look good? Or it just makes no sense. My role as we get into that last 6, 8, whatever weeks is the way I look at it is fitness, and I'm no S&C. These guys train so many times, and girls, that we aren't making them fit by adding a trail run onto their thing. They get fit by being available to do as much of the training load that the coach has dictated is what their athlete needs in that fight. So whether that's a heavy grapple camp like Perth was, or whether that's a striking camp, we've got to make sure that we give them the athlete that they can then train to get fit. So my role in that last 6 or 8 weeks is essentially, where are you today? And this is my favourite argument with physios. We're killing ourselves as a profession by saying what you're doing treatment-wise has no effect. Right? It's the biggest staunch at the moment on physios. Whereas I would say what I'm doing today is to give Alex or Colby or whoever it is we're treating the best opportunity to have the best session possible for the next 2 hours. Full stop. I'm not really lengthening a pec minor. I'm not really increasing the elastic component of their glenohumeral joint at end range. I want them to have the range available and feel as good as they can to get the most out of the session from a technical and capacity building point of view. And I think if we fit ourselves in at the real bottom, so we're the first person consulted, but really we add no value to the training load other than to give them over to say, now go and train. And that's something that I've always felt really strongly about, is that when we see an athlete, we've got to get you as good as we can, because the session is going to make you better. And stacking sessions is going to make you fitter. I don't think physios have a role in it any other way.
What about fight week? When we get out of fight camp, guys go away, such as Volk, Colby now. Guys we all travel away. We all get in these houses. It's a great time. And we all do the madness that is fight week. And for people who don't know at home, it's not just the fighter rocking up and then eating their meals. There's so many other things. There's travel, there's admin they have to do, there's media. They're constantly in and out. It's a wild week, and it's a lot of outside stress to the fighter. What are you guys doing when you go away with them? Say with Volk, when you go away, Jaff, what are you doing when you get there? Do you sit down and go, hey, Volk, we got to do 2-3 sessions a week, or is there a structure? What's the game plan? What do you do on the fight weeks?
I'm lucky in the sense that my work's done by then, largely. Our last strength and conditioning session usually is probably about between 10 to 7 days out from a fight, depending on logistics, where he's flying to. So I don't believe anything we can do from then on in has going to have any direct implications to the fight. We're not getting any fitter. We can help I can sit there and say, okay, Volk, make sure you warm up prior to this session. And he has his own process he goes through for that, just reminding of key things. But, Perth and then LA, I was there just as a part of the team, helping out, carrying a few bags, copping a bit of heat by Frankie Hickman's. And then, just been helping out where I could.
Yeah, but I think you can't underplay that, right? Especially with an athlete like Volt that is very cerebral and that needs to be comfortable, needs to know that the process has worked. So having someone there just for him to say, you might just be saying, hey, Volt, go warm up. He's got the safety net of, hey, Jaff's here, I'm going to warm up properly. I'm going to be in the best position to do this training session while Geordie rips all this weight off me and I'm depleted and feeling terrible. Bainesy, what are you doing fight week? Because you do a lot fight week.
Yeah.
I always say I work a lot fight week, but then I look over at you, Bainesy, and I feel like I never see you sitting down. You're always massaging. So what's your plan fight week? How do you go about treating, say, Alex, Colby, those level of athletes?
So fight week is work, right? And whether our wives listen to this podcast, but fight week for me is work. Fight camp is work. And because everything matters at every session. And it is such a different week. Because, obviously Alex and some of the older guys now have been around so many times, but you know that they're going to stand on their feet for 4 hours on Tuesday. They're going to sign all those posters. They're going to do media. They never do that. So they're not conditioned for that. It's not a normal activity for them. They're away from home. We've been fortunate. We've had some nice, 7, 8, 9 people in a house, but 7 or 8, 9 people in a house, often you need a refuge away from those people. So it tends to be physio bed. We go away. I think Alex and I, we spend a lot of time after hours when everyone else has had dinner and do that, because you want to be setting up for the next week. It's hard on his body to strip the weight off. You strip off, thoracic range, diaphragm, abdo-fascia, like everything becomes an effort. And in that week, it's still a huge training load. It still stuns me how many sessions and sweats and things that he gets through, but he's doing it with a body that's not his normal body. And so, I mean, it is now, I think I was looking at the other day, it's probably 10 or 11 like fight camp weeks now where I sort of know where he's going to struggle. His hip's going to get sore there. He's going to be struggling through his neck. It is such a challenge to him physically. He's such a pro, and that's where I feel like fight week is the value. So probably the opposite. The couple of weeks out, you're just troubleshooting. I mean, obviously we're in a house with a whole heap of other hanger-oners too. So, and I should say this and retract that is some of these guys in the team give their body to science. Like it is crazy. Like Alex flogs them and they're not allowed to fight back. And so you do spend a fair bit of time in fight week patching up training partners. It's because that week is all about the fighter. So they're not going to do anything except just show up again. We were in Jersey, Frank came into camp with rib cartilage that Brad popped for him the last session before they got on a plane. And you wouldn't have seen Frank wince the whole way through. But there's a fair bit of time patching people up. So that's sort of, I haven't had a really stressful fight week other than Perth. That got a bit sketchy towards the end. And I'm sure at the end of the day when the career's done and there's a doco series, potentially some of the facts will come out about what goes down in those last few days. But yeah, it's work. It's not just the ATO and my wife being told, like it's work.
How many moments have you had like that, Bainesy, where it's touch and go? We won't get into details like you said. We won't get into it. But how many times have you had it where you've sat down and been like, oh my God?
Across multiple fighters, there's a big one that you and I spoke about that was really harrowing, and it wasn't Alex. And just when you get exposed to a few things and you're like, okay, whereas in a team sport, you'd pull them. In team sport, you'd say, all right, well, that, we've got another centre on the bench. As much as that fullback's our best player, they can't really go. In this sport, the warrior, they don't have a plan B by that stage. We've had some sketchy stuff. I think since we've had a couple of in-camp stuff 3 weeks out where, the beauty that we've got now with the trust with our fighters is initially they would see us as don't tell the truth to Bainesy because he'll rule us out, to now, and this is where Lopez has been outstanding, is you're not doing anything until Bainesy has seen you, and then we'll get a Jaff translation of what you can do. And that's, like the amount of MRIs that we order at, like guys will get hurt in Windang and we'll say, you just drive to Wollongong, I'll have it squared away by the time you get there. Have your scan, let me run it past a few sports docs, we'll come up with a strategy. You'll miss half a session.
Let's talk about if you were to suggest to the other guys, because we're talking a lot about Volk, we're talking about Colby, both UFC fighters. Like you said, they've got more resources, right? Not everyone has a South Coast Health Hub down the road, which is basically just like a UFC PI on these guys' doorstep. Very, very, very fortunate. But that's not the case for a lot of fighters. A lot of fighters listening to this are going to be going, man, like, I've got to drive 45 minutes to do my strength conditioning. The physio that kind of has an idea of what to do is an hour and a half up the coast, and this guy's over here. We'll go through both of you guys, but what do you recommend? What are some low-hanging fruit if someone's listening and going, man, I do need to take strength and conditioning more serious. I need to take my physio prehab before I'm injured more serious. Jaff, what are some low-hanging fruits that these guys can take away, put into action right now?
So I always ask myself, whenever I'm preparing like the plan for any athlete, there's 3 questions. What does the sport require? What does the athlete require? And what are they missing? So in terms of what does the sport require, we know that, like I said before, in terms of there's the high force output. So getting stronger to be able to wrestle and grapple. So the low-hanging fruit there is leg strength. People traditionally want to talk about core strength and core this, core that. It's the legs that are the most important. So the way I explain it to all fighters at how important the legs are, I say, okay, punch someone with 2 feet on the ground. Punch someone on your knees, punch someone sitting down. Where do you think the power comes from? And inherently they get it because they'll talk, the coaches will talk about, rolling the foot a certain way or turning the hips, So, they'll understand that. But the strength of the legs is vital. So that's a low-hanging fruit there. In terms of what does the athlete need, we're lucky enough, as we said, to be able to test and use some, get some objective data. But this can be done a different way too. Often the athlete will come and say, I'm not well conditioned. Like I lost my last fight because my conditioning wasn't right, or my arms really gas out when I'm grappling lots. Little things like that, or I feel like I'm a bit of a plodder. I'm not, creating enough power or being explosive. So that can guide aspects of your training. Like it doesn't, you don't put all the eggs in one basket and solely focus on just your plyometrics or your power capacity. You need to be ticking all the boxes. So basically then we want to work on the weakness. So that might be, if it is conditioning, well, are we dedicating time to bring up your weakness? And that then ties in with what are we missing? So the freestyle guys, the freestyle has this massive churn out of well-conditioned athletes. So for me, placing conditioning on those athletes, it would be, we would just overload them. We'd probably create more problems. So, but for other places, and it might be those athletes traveling to different gyms and missing certain conditioning. If that's their weakness, they need to dedicate some time there. But again, looking at slow cooking it and not trying to do that, in 1 week. It's, consistent effort over, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 2 years to bring them up to speed.
Can you throw some standard exercise? We're talking just get in a gym, do some squats, do a deadlift, Bulgarian split spots, conditioning. Are we on the air dime? Can you throw some generic ones out? I know everyone hates a generic answer, but let's give the guy some.
So, the big thing is I often would talk about the context is more important than the content. So it makes it hard, but I will give you a few.
I was going to say the most dietitian-y answer. I can't say it, but people go, it depends. I go, it doesn't depend. Give us an answer.
So I find, and this is not everyone, the majority of athletes pull up a little bit sore in their lower back from use in wrestling. So I've kind of shifted towards a trap bar deadlift as being one of the key lifts. I think athletes can set themselves up a little bit better in there, less back load, more leg load, so they can push some good numbers with that. So that's one of our key lifts. A single leg exercise. So you set it with the Bulgarian split squat. It's one of a strength coach's favourite, but not necessarily athlete's favourite because it does give you a fair bit of DOM. So I would go with just a normal generic split squat. But yeah, at times rear foot elevated split squat when you're not worried about if you have DOMs and you can get through training. So those are two lower body. You can't go wrong with weighted chin-ups, heavy single arm rows. That covers your upper back, your grip strength, a lot of your wrestle muscles. And then in terms of your hips, I use the hip thrust a lot. It's no stranger if you've ever seen any videos of Volk or Colby. Part of that is because of their wrestling heavy training sessions. And I feel that like a hip thrust strengthens their hips and their glutes with less nervous system fatigue involved, where they can throw some huge amount of numbers and weight into it, not be too fatigued after, in a quite a familiar and similar movement pattern to what they're used to sprawling and, in jits, bridging and things like that.
Yeah, awesome. What about conditioning?
Conditioning. So this is a hard one. So this is where, again, you have to look at what you're missing. So a lot of the classes will sit in that middle range. So I feel like you've got to sit on either side of that. So, some aerobic development at lower intensity and just putting some time into that, or having periods of some high intensity. The assault bikes, it is great. Like, there's not too many people that get on or get off that and don't feel like they're going to vomit, which is not always the plan, but, that gets your intensity the highest. So, yeah, doing some type of intervals on that assault bike.
Me and Bainesy have a good story from the assault
I've heard
bike
about that.
getting absolutely
We
abused.
met over an assault bike.
Getting absolutely abused by the fellas I eventually ended up spewing everywhere over the PI. Not a good time. Bainesy did come out on top. I'll give it to him.
It was
The old fella.
only time that I'll ever beat Geordie cardio.
I remember looking at his eyes and Bainesy, there was just no quitting there, and I just had all quit. I had
I
nothing
remember
left.
leaving the gym, but it was a big day. It was anyway, it's another story.
Low-hanging fruit, Bainesy. Physio. We've got an amateur. They're listening in. They go, maybe I can't afford to go see a physio every week. Is there at-home exercises? Are there things they should be doing in the gym? What are low-hanging fruits for them?
So probably unpopularly, I'd say find a good one and see them infrequently would be what I do. And my big thing is, and there's two sides to this. Obviously, with Alex and Colby and the professionals, it's different because it's about refining the best possible for the next session. But on that journey early on, I see such and such, they're amazing. I've been seeing them for 6 years. Okay. For the same injury, they can't be that good. They call it fix it again, thanks. I'd want to be with someone who's like, right, I actually probably don't have time to spend once a week with you for the next 50 weeks. Let's get to the top of it. So comprehensive history, comprehensive understanding of what's going on. Let's get not so much a body chart, but let's work out where your priorities are. What do you need? Most of those times it will come back to, well, you need a proximal hamstring tendon loading program in a non-compressive way. Patient says, what does that mean? And I go, well, you just need to add that into your strength. You don't need to go to the physio for tendonitis. You need to understand what it is, be diagnosed properly, and have that as part of your strength. Do you have a neurological compromise with, well, we need to get on top of that, treat it. Do we have the right medical team around you, whether that's anti-inflammatory, whether that's imaging? The physio is this really privileged position of being normally the first person called and the most trusted early on, but you can abuse that if you don't really put the athlete first. And the low-hanging fruit for me is the relationships. And, when we present to S&C coaches, for example, like they're already really good at what they do. And I'll say, well, who's the physio that you trust the most? Who are you still competing against? Like the physio shouldn't be trying to hold on to this patient. They should be empowering them with a safe messaging to a really trusted provider. And then that's doing all the work for you. And then in 2 or 3 months, touch base with me and we'll see where we're at. I think you're better off getting a really good initial history, a really good first fit, rather than just that regular. You'd almost say if it's just tissue therapy that you want, well, then that's where maybe a really impressive remedial, or it depends, I don't know, cost of living and things like that, I'd be spending on the S&C, I'd be spending on Jaff over a 12-month period rather than a consolidated regular physio until there's a new injury. Always start again. The biggest thing people go wrong is they come in and say, well, I've been struggling with this for 4 months. I'm like, man, it's too hard. I was seeing how it would go. That's when you needed to jump in early.
After listening to you guys talk, I'm starting to think you've got Volk on the payroll. Just start spiking people on the head in freestyle just to give South.
Well, we don't. Yeah, but
business.
they're sponsored, so they don't help us. You'd be better off spiking other people.
Yeah, very true. Last question before we go into the final set. Lots of practitioners, lots of young practitioners listen to the show. Very difficult to get good education in combat sports, whether it be S&C, whether it be diet, whether it be physio. Do you have any advice if there's someone who's a new grad, or even if they're experienced and they're getting these fighters coming to them going, hey, I need your help, I need to get stronger, I need to rehab this injury, whatever. Start with you, Baines. Do you have any advice that you would give to young physios?
So I've got two parts to this. as a young physio, just the only way you can be a good physio 10 years out is to still be a physio 10 years out. All right, so just stop. First 150 weeks of your career, you don't know anything. Just accept that. Say yes, do things, learn, reach out, learn. You can't be good. Doesn't matter if you were a black belt in something, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be very good at what you do. But if you quit, like most physios do in that 3-4 year post-grad, then you'll never be good. So that's the first one. Secondly is we don't get taught any of this stuff. So make a connection with someone. If you want to be a combat, so people hit me on Instagram all the time when, you've seen when we travel together, I want to be a UFC physio. I'm like, there's none of us. That doesn't exist. You just need to be a good physio who works with lots of athletes. Go from there. If you want to work in combat sports, you need to understand the sport. You need to be able to not upset the coaches. You need to have the trust from the athlete. That'll come when you're not a rookie. If you're an old physio trying to go in, I would say you need to make the S&C connections because they'll make you look good from there.
Yeah, Jeff?
I think they've got to look at it as a long game. So too many S&Cs want to start at the top. Like we're in just this lucky situation. It's quite a rare. But now that UFC MMA strength and conditioning's been around for a long time, there's not too many UFC fighters that wouldn't have someone looking after their strength and conditioning. So you have to look at it as a progression of the career and having that career approach where you start with the amateur athlete and build maybe that's the next tier down in terms of your Eternals or your Hex, those style of athletes. The amateurs, as I said, start with those athletes and have their journey with them as well. I think look elsewhere as well from just purely S&C for MMA. I think the ideas get regurgitated, a lot of similarities. You've got to look elsewhere at what people are doing in other sports as well. As Mick said, work with different sports, work with different people, build your skills, because that's not only your strength and conditioning skills, it's also your people skills that, we're lucky enough, through different sports I hadn't done a UFC fighter as I said, but I had the confidence to know, that I knew what I was doing, and also if things didn't go how it was supposed to go, I had the confidence to know, okay, that didn't work. I've seen this before. I've had other experiences. Let's tweak this, make the change and move on. So it's, build your experience, play the long game. Don't.
As a young clinician, sponsor people. I mean, I can't stress that enough. Like you want to sit there and say, I'm the physio that like a Zane, a 16, 17-year-old kid who's super talented is coming through, offer to sponsor them, offer to look after them. Like if what you really want to do is be in the sport, you can't sit on the other side of the table and want top dollar with no experience to be in the sport. Be part of the journey with these guys early on, and that's how you'll build brand reputation and trust. Look at some of those jits gyms in Melbourne with 70, 80 people rolling around on the mats. I mean, it's good enough for you and I to deal with world champions, but if you want to be in that environment, why don't you offer 4 or 5, scholarship, sponsorship opportunities to athletes, if that's where you want to be?
Yeah, best advice I ever got on that front was there's a lot more non-UFC fighters than there are UFC fighters. That's a very, very important thing. 2 last questions I'll ask before we get into what's happening at South Coast. 2 questions we ask everyone who comes on the podcast. Both got to answer it. First question, how do you define performance? It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I thought of this because when I was running with a friend of mine, he's a fighter jet pilot, and he said to me, he goes, Geordie, you work with a lot of elite athletes. He goes, how do you define performance? And I thought, how I define performance is very different to how you define it. But very interested, Jaff.
So I'm going to go broad here, broad and narrow. So I think performance is hitting your objective, but in the manner you wanted to hit it in. So full stop.
Boom. That's a tough one to follow, Bainesy.
Yeah. I mean, I said I didn't do any prep. For me, truthfully, performance is what it is. Like it's the journey. It doesn't, you put something before or after. It's high performance, low performance, stressful performance. But, we're living. It's what we're doing. That's all.
Last one from me before we get into it. What is performance for Mick Baines in your life right now?
Right now, it's a bizarre space at the moment. It's somewhere between aspirational, idyllic family life, and it's something I've wrestled with for a while. Jordy knows this, and it's a bit of legacy as well. I'm sort of somehow in that egotistical space of trying to leave something that's, something to be proud of behind in the career without it taking away my time with my family. So it's performance is an ongoing audition for me at the moment.
Yeah, sounds like you've been meditating a bit there, Bainesy. Jaff?
Look at performance for me personally. It probably comes down to three sort of channels, work being one, physical and family. So work, I'm an athlete, so I'm a client. So am I giving them what they need? Are they succeeding in getting to where that they want to be? Physical, am I hitting my desired sessions for the week? Am I going through the motions like just to tick the box, or am I intentionally hitting them? And then family, making sure, I spend enough time with the wife and 3 kids, so they all flow off each other. But if they're all ticked, it's usually I feel like I'm performing well.
Yeah, I'm ticking all the boxes. Now, lots of people will be listening to this and they'll go, I need a Jaff, I need a Baines in my life. Give us you guys' social media, but more importantly, I want to hear about South Coast Health Hub, what you guys have going on there, because realistically, every fighter should be there. Every fighter should have that hub. We just don't have it everywhere. Do you guys do online? Talk to us about that. What's the plan? How can people listening to this, they go, man, I need this and I need someone taking care of this side of it. Is that a possibility for them?
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, a little bit like answering. So normally that comes through, they'll reach out either through South Coast Health Hub, through Jaff. Jaff's probably got more presence online than me and the business combined. But they'll get to us with a question. We'll always come back to them. I'm happy to sit. I've always said I'm happy to sit with nearly anyone around the world for a one-off consult that are going to use Jaff long term, right? So if they end up with an S&C, but in the part of the onboarding, and we've got an amazing Frenchman on the card this weekend who Jordy and I roomed with in New York, and he had all these questions. I said, send an email to Jaff. That night he sent like a multiple page email, and all of a sudden he's switched on. So then for me, I know he's under control there. I'll help over here. So reach out from anywhere in the world is the best thing to do.
And that's through website, socials?
I think the best way to reach me is through Instagram, at Chris Jaffrey. Yeah.
That's it. I mean, with the South Coast Health Hub website, and then the big announcement that's coming soon is that there will be a specific Raise Performance website coming soon, which will be the performance arm of the Health Hub. But it will be, obviously, Chris's, he spent 15, 20 years getting to this point. It's time to have a specific performance brand. So we're excited to see where it goes. It'll be ready before Alex fights next.
Give us a rundown of that, Jaff, just quickly before we finish up, because it sounds important. So this is your online health hub. People can come here and everything we just spoke about, they can get access to?
Yeah, so it's online and in person. Yeah, so it's in person and online. So basically we're going to target athletes and athletic individuals. So it doesn't have to be a lead athlete. We can help with anyone to try and help them meet their goals. Often we see these athletes and the everyday athlete, they just kind of don't know how to pull it all together. So I can be that person to manage them, direct what's needed, and overall look after their training.
Yeah, perfect. And best way if someone to get in contact with that, is that through the Health Hub? Is that a separate, how's that work?
It'll be both. But obviously if you hit at Chris Jaffrey to start with, but for us as a Health Hub, business. This will be our pinnacle. This will be our performance arm of the business. It'll be separate brand, and then everything from speed in sport, strength and conditioning, transition from, because I think where most physios and performance go wrong is the physio takes them back to the field, which to me is insane. Like, I think that the performance strength and conditioning coach should be the one returning that ACL to running, returning that Achilles repair to boxing, whatever it might be. So I think we'll find a whole heap of physios should be like, yes, the thing that I'm terrible at, I'll keep you as a physio patient so that Bainesy's mob don't, these are my patients, but the performance side of it, go over to Ray's, go and get back to sport that way, and everything else.
raysperformance.com.au. There you go. Heard it here first. All right, gents, thanks so much. I know you're both busy. UFC Fight Week in Sydney here. Thank you guys for coming down to do this. I'm getting sick of looking at you guys, so we need to wrap this up because I know we've got a fight week coming up. I'm going to have to stare at you guys for far too long. But boys, thanks so much. That was an awesome podcast. So thank you guys for taking the time. Always a pleasure. Just quickly, personal Instagrams, Chris Jaffrey and Bainesy. What was yours?
M. Baines.
M. Baines. All right, perfect. All right, gents. Thank you very much for that.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jordy. Thanks, mate.